SuperTalk Mississippi Media production.
Looking for a ride you can actually rely on? At Southeast Auto Direct in Iuka, we don't just sell cars, we back them up. Home of the free 20-year, 200,000-mile warranty. We offer the best prices on the cleanest pre-owned inventory in the market. Visit us on Highway 72 or shop online at southeastautodirect.com. Your next journey starts here.
Was previously recorded.
Oh, yeah.
Good morning, Mississippi.
Everything gonna be all right this morning.
Mornings with Richard Cross.
Oh, yeah.
Here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Woo! Now, when I was a young boy, at the age of 5, my mother said I was gonna be.
Morning and welcome. It is Mornings with Richard Cross on SuperTalk Mississippi. Thanks for being with us as we begin on this Friday morning. You can go ahead and make all of your jokes. Oh, it's Richard. He's working on a Friday. We're going to change things up a little bit on Fridays, and I'll tell you a little bit about that as we go throughout the show this morning. But great to be with you as we start things off. Mornings with Richard Cross is presented by Community Bank. Online, communitybank.net. Community Bank, rooted in our community. Today is May 8th, Friday, May 8th, 2026. We welcome you in and appreciate you making us part of your routine on this Friday morning, and frankly on every morning for a lot of you. Kind of hard to believe. College graduation's happening this weekend. We have, for most, I understand there's some different school schedules, some different scheduling models with public schools across the state, but for most, 2 weeks left of school for kindergarten through seniors in high school. Congratulations to all of those who are getting close to walking across the stage and taking your cap and tossing it into the air and the whole deal. And then summer's here. I mean, before we know it, it's Memorial Day. If you operate on an academic calendar or a sports calendar, you know that you've got this weekend and next weekend left in the regular season for college baseball. And then it's on to the SEC tournament or the Sun Belt tournament. And then NCAA regional plays is here. We get Memorial Day mixed in there. We blink, and the 4th of July is here. And then we're counting down to the start of college football season. Just slow down for a minute. Try to take it all in and enjoy it along the way. Should be a good day for most of Mississippi for you to enjoy a Friday, and hopefully we'll hold on for the rest of the weekend. Baseball happening tonight in Oxford with Ole Miss and Texas A&M beginning their 3-game series. Going to be nice in Oxford today. Mid to maybe upper 70s, your overnight low. Going to be in the upper 50s, partly cloudy, really, really low chance of rain today. It's going to be pleasant and milder after the cooler days and nights that we've had for much of this week, just light winds. Forecast also looks good for Saturday, for Ole Miss graduation and for baseball. About a 50% chance of rain and scattered thunderstorms on Sunday. That could potentially affect the late start time on Sunday. I think first pitch of that game is at 5 o'clock because of television. Starkville got the weekend started with baseball last night, got it tonight, and then we'll wrap things up in week 9 tomorrow. Mid-70s to low 80s in Starkville on this Friday. Probably going to be upper 50s for the overnight. Lows mostly cloudy, and then going to mix in some sunshine with a low rain chance. It's going to continue to warm up in Starkville. State finishes that series with Auburn tomorrow. You can expect sunshine and a high in the upper 70s. There is a chance for some rain on Saturday morning. Hattiesburg, Golden Eagles getting after it this weekend. Going to be mid to upper 70s for your high today with lows tonight in the low 60s. Rain showers are likely into the afternoon. Hopefully going to clear off, though, in time for baseball tonight. Possibly some scattered thunderstorms, a little cloudier than normal in spots. We'll see. And on the coast in Biloxi, mid-70s, maybe upper 70s with an overnight low in the mid-60s. Mix of clouds and sun with possible scattered showers or maybe even some isolated thunderstorms. It's going to be a little humid as well. So that is your weather across the state of Mississippi on this Friday as we look forward to the weekend. On this day, in 1884, the 33rd President of the United States, Harry S. Truman, was born. He lived until 1972. You remember that Truman had been vice president for just 82 days when President Roosevelt died on April 12th of 1945. He was presiding over the Senate, as usual at that time. They had just adjourned the session for the day, and he was headed to Sam Rayburn's office, House Speaker Sam Rayburn, for a post-day drink. And then he got an urgent message from the White House that he needed to get there right away. Eleanor Roosevelt met him at the White House, telling him that her husband had died after a massive cerebral hemorrhage. Truman asked Eleanor Roosevelt if there was anything that he could do for her, and she replied, "No, is there anything we can do for you? For you are the one in trouble now." He was sworn in as president that night at 7:09 in the West Wing of the White House by Chief Justice Harlan Stone. The 1948 presidential election, 3 years later, remembered for Truman's stunning come-from-behind victory. In the spring of 1948, his public approval rating stood at 36%. The president was nearly universally regarded as incapable of winning that general election. But the defining image of the campaign came the day after Election Day, when an ecstatic Harry Truman held aloft the erroneous front page of the Chicago Tribune with that huge, infamous headline blaring, "Dewey defeats Truman." Not so fast, my friend. Harry Truman, born on this day in 1884. Henry Dunant was born in 1828, the founder of the Red Cross and a Nobel Peace Prize winner. Also born on this day in 1737, Edward Gibbon, a British historian who wrote The History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. The empire that would never decline and could never fall, reminding us that all of them do. 1753, Miguel Hidalgo y Castilla, was the leader of the Mexican War of Independence, but he was a priest. Hidalgo y Castilla was born in 1753. Rare that you lead a revolution and are a person of the cloth. Enrique Iglesias, born on this day in 1975, turning 51 today, the Spanish singer and songwriter known for Hero and Bailando and so many others. What about world-class funny man Don Rickles, born in 1926? He was known for insult comedy, although it always felt like it was good-hearted or well-meaning insult comedy. It was playful. It was not as mean-spirited as some of what we see today. And also Peter Benchley, the author of the book. Yes, it was a book before it was a movie. Peter Benchley, the author of Jaws, born in 1940. On this day in 1541, Spanish explorer Hernando de Soto becomes the first European to make it to the Mississippi River. 1886, it was this day, May 8th, 1886, when Coca-Cola was sold for the very first time by pharmacist John Pemberton. That happened in Atlanta, Georgia. Originally, it was a medicinal tonic. I guess for some it still is, but we just think of it as a soft drink. 1902, Mount Pelée erupts on the island of Martinique. It destroyed the town of Saint Pierre, killing approximately 30,000 people, one of the deadliest volcanic disasters of the entire 20th century. And of course, today, May 8th, marks VE Day. Victory in Europe Day. After nearly 6 years of war starting in 1939, Nazi Germany faced total defeat on the continent of Europe. Adolf Hitler died by suicide in his Berlin bunker in the end of April 30th. And his successor, Grand Admiral Karl Donitz, authored the unconditional surrender of all German armed forces. The first signing occurred May 7th, 1945 in France at Supreme Allied Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower's headquarters. German Chief of Staff General Alfred Jodl signed on behalf of Germany, but at the insistence of the Soviets, there was a second, slightly modified signing. It took place on May 8, 1945 in Karlshorst, Berlin. German Field Marshal Wilhelm Kettl signed the definitive German instrument of surrender. That surrender went into effect at 23:01 Central European Time on May 8th, and it sparked celebrations all over the world. In the United Kingdom, it was declared a national holiday. Huge crowds filling the London streets, Trafalgar Square and Piccadilly Circus. Winston Churchill addressed the nation. He appeared on the balcony of the Ministry of Health building, telling the crowds, "This is your victory." Street parties, bonfires, dancing, singing, they all continued throughout the night. King George VI and the royal family appeared on the Buckingham Palace balcony. In the United States, slightly more tempered celebration, slightly. Harry S. Truman announced the victory and designated May 8th as VE Day. Crowds gathered in Times Square with church bells ringing and horns blaring. However, Harry Truman was cautious, reminding Americans that the war against Japan was not over. Got a few more things that happened on this day in history. We'll give you those coming up. We remind you that the best way to connect with us is on the C Spire text line, 601-879-4395. Don't miss out on the deals at C Spire. You can learn more online at cspire.com. C Spire, customer inspired. More of On This Day. Plus, we'll look at...
Good morning from the Venable.
Know what's being said in the halls of the Capitol? You're in the right place. Mornings with Richard Cross continues on Super Talk Mississippi.
Hope your Friday is off to a good start. If you're already with us this morning, it is Mornings with Richard Cross, presented by Community Bank on Super Talk Mississippi. A couple of other notable events on this day, May 8th, 1846. That's when you had the first major battle of the Mexican-American War. It was fought in Palo Alto, Texas. 1912, Paramount Pictures was founded. I wonder what the founders of Paramount would think about where that company is right now, and if it ever would have been worth as much as it is purported to be worth. 1942, you had the Battle of the Coral Sea beginning. That is the first naval battle in history entirely fought by aircraft carriers without the opposing ships ever seeing each other. On this day in 1970, May 8th, the Beatles released their final studio album. It was a little album called Let It Be. A couple of other things. 1978, Reinhold Messner and Peter Habler made the first ascent of Mount Everest without any supplemental oxygen. That happened in 1978. And then in 1980, got an announcement from the World Health Organization that smallpox had officially been eradicated. Those are the things that kind of stand out this day in history. Let's take a look at some news headlines this morning, first from around the state, and then we'll go to some national news as well. One adult and two juveniles are being criminally charged in connection with a shooting along the Mississippi Gulf Coast. The Harrison County Sheriff's Office reports that Princeton Dunn, Billy Gray, and Jeremiah Agee, ages 19, 17, and 16, have been charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon after a shooting that left a man in critical condition. Deputies responded in Saussure on Thursday to reports of gunfire. At the scene, authorities spotted an unidentified male suffering a gunshot wound. That victim was promptly transported to a local hospital for treatment. After investigating, law enforcement officials were able to identify the three suspects, Dunn, Gray, and Agee, as suspects and take them into custody. All three were taken to the Harrison County Adult Detention Center, each being held on $500,000 bond. And you may remember from some of our news headlines earlier than this week, you had the law that went into effect that minors who are charged with gun crimes, violent gun crimes, can and will be charged as adults moving forward. So not good news for those young men. An investigation is underway after an individual broke into a Jackson elementary school and stole multiple valuable items. JPS announced on Thursday, so yesterday, that a suspect broke into Casey Elementary near Ridgewood Road overnight. The individual, described as a black male in his late teens to early 20s, is reported to have forced entry into the school around 1:20 a.m. on Thursday. So that was Wednesday night into Thursday morning. The suspect, who is believed to be about 5'10", had on a white bandana covering most of his face while wearing a gray baseball cap, a black hoodie, and camouflage shorts. Authorities say that the suspect stole electronics, credit cards, and other items before fleeing the scene with a backpack that he also had stolen. No one was at the school when the thief trekked it, and no injuries were reported. If you have any information connected to the suspect or the break-in, Jackson Police would certainly appreciate the help. Give them a call and let them know. On Wednesday night, we had the rough storms across the state of Mississippi, especially central and southern Mississippi. Mississippi SNAP recipients affected by Wednesday night storms and tornadoes will have the opportunity to apply for replacement benefits. Mississippi Department of Human Services allows beneficiaries of the Federal Food Assistance Program to seek relief whenever items purchased with SNAP funds are destroyed due to a disaster, including an extreme weather event like we had on Wednesday night. Clients are encouraged to manage their cases using their access in the government portal. That's access.ms.gov, or by going to the secure document upload feature on the website to upload documents quickly and securely, and to check each case information and benefit status. Those who meet the criteria will then be asked to report the value of the food that was lost in the disaster. If approved, replacement benefits equal to the value of food lost will be issued up to the maximum amount of SNAP benefits that are allowed for the month. For food purchased with SNAP benefits to be replaced, the disaster must be reported within 10 days of the date that the loss occurred. And I guess worth mentioning, that could include a power outage, even if you didn't have a total loss of a home or, a tree that fell and, knocked the roof off of your house. If you just lost power and had a refrigerator that went out and food spoiled, that also is eligible. 3 Jackson firefighters are in trouble. Pretty stupid decision. They are accused of working under the influence of alcohol, and they have been placed on administrative leave. Officials are investigating after the first responders, while on duty over the weekend, allegedly consumed alcoholic beverages at an unidentified Jackson location, a watering hole, as it were. The firefighters were subsequently dispatched to a fire, per officials. After responding to the scene, law enforcement was called, sobriety testing was administered, and the firefighters were found to be in violation of their department's policy. Jackson Fire Chief Rayshawn Thomas confirmed the story. At this time, the names of the firefighters allegedly involved in the incident have not been released by officials. All right, national story here, keeping up with what is happening in Iran. The United States military said that it intercepted Iranian attacks on Thursday of 3 Navy ships in the Strait of Hormuz, and that they targeted Iranian military facilities responsible for attacking the U.S. forces, highlighting the fragility of the now month-old ceasefire between the two countries. U.S. Central Command said in a social media post that U.S. forces intercepted unprovoked Iranian attacks and responded with self-defense strikes. The U.S. military said no ships were actually hit. It said it does not seek escalation, but, quote, remains positioned and ready to protect American forces, close quote. President Donald Trump told reporters in Washington that the ceasefire was holding despite the violence. Trump, in the way that only he can say it, says, quote, "They trifled with us today. We blew them away," close quote. Meanwhile, Iranian state media said that the country's armed forces exchanged fire with the enemy on Qasem Island in the Strait. It's the largest Iranian island in the Persian Gulf, home to about 150,000 people. It also houses a water desalination plant. The ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran has largely held since April 8th. In-person talks between the two countries hosted in Pakistan last month failed to reach an agreement to end the war that began on the 28th of February when the United States and Israel launched that strike against Iran. Earlier in the day on Thursday, Tehran said that it was examining the latest U.S. proposals for ending the war. So we will see where that goes. Those are your news headlines on this Friday morning. We've got Sports Update coming up. Our Sports Update, as always, is presented by Pearl River Resort. You can join the conversation on the C Spire text line. That's the best way for you to get in touch with us, although much of this show is pre-recorded, so if we're slow on responding to messages today, that's why. Monday through Thursdays, though, love hearing from you on the C Spire text line. Just save the number in your phone, 601-879-4395. With C Spire, it's easier than ever to get all the devices you want in one move with the Ultimate Connect bundle. Right now, new and current customers can get a free phone, watch, and tablet, plus 100 gigs of data for just $90. That includes a new iPhone 17 or a Samsung Galaxy S26 for free, a free smartwatch, and a tablet to go with it. So don't wait. There's more to see. Visit cspire.com or stop by your local C Spire store today. Glad to be with you on this Friday morning. Going to be a gorgeous day across most of the state of Mississippi. We've got plenty more coming up with you. When we come back, we'll take a look at this weekend's baseball. Mississippi State and Auburn got started last night. Ole Miss begins their series with Texas A&M coming up tonight. And, of course, Southern Miss hosting James Madison in the penultimate week of the regular season in college baseball. Right now, we'll take a timeout. We're back with you after this. Mornings with Richard Cross on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Heart of stone. Oh, no, heart of stone.
From thesebro.com at the inside track on Mississippi politics. Yeah! Mornings with Richard Cross on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Keep everything in the farm. Upset in every way.
Welcome back. It is Mornings with Richard Cross on this Friday morning, May 8th. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for spending part of your day with us. Glad to be with you. It's time for your morning sports update brought to you by Pearl River Resort. Online at pearlriverresort.com. Pearl River Resort is your home for family fun, casino thrills, and live entertainment. And it's your home for championship golf. 2 18-hole championship courses, the Oaks and the Azaleas, courses that you can play. Book your tee time online at dancingrabbitgolf.com. That's dancingrabbitgolf.com. We got plenty to talk about as we roll toward the next to last weekend of the regular season in college baseball. Mississippi State got the weekend started last night. Full disclosure, I am recording this sports update for you with Mississippi State leading in the 7th inning. I'm going to make the assumption that the Bulldogs held on. Now, it is altogether possible that burns me. I'm just going to make that assumption. You can go to Mississippi State's athletics website, hailstate.com, read the full game story, and look at the final stats. But Mississippi State hosting the Auburn Tigers to start the SEC baseball weekend. It was a top 11 matchup. Auburn coming in ranked 6th in the country. Mississippi State was ranked 11th. Bulldogs, when I shut it down, had an 8-3 lead in the bottom of the 7th inning. It was highlighted by a grand slam from Bryce Chance in the bottom of the first. Had kind of a wild start to the game in the bottom of the first inning. There were 2 outs. Looked like a routine ground ball to shortstop. Kind of a nonchalant play. Bulldog base runner beat it out. And then you got a couple of singles and the grand slam from Bryce Chance to give Mississippi State the early lead. It was his second grand slam in 6 days. So impressive stuff there. D1 Baseball has put out its regional projections. We'll give you those in just a second. The action that you've got this weekend, number 24 Oklahoma is at number 17 Arkansas. That one gets started at 4 o'clock Central Time this afternoon in Fayetteville. At 4:30, you've got number 19 Alabama coming off a home sweep against Vanderbilt this past weekend. 32-17 overall, 13-11 in conference play. They are in Columbia, South Carolina to take on the Gamecocks. LSU, 9-15 in conference play, but coming off a sweep against South Carolina. On the road to take on the mighty number 5 Georgia Bulldogs. Georgia in first place in the SEC with a conference record of 18-6. Number 4 Texas at 15-8 in the league is on the road in Knoxville this weekend. First pitch between the Longhorns and the Vols in the Battle of the UTs. Well, that one gets started at 5:30. Also a 5:30 start for Kentucky and Florida. The Gators are 13-11. Kentucky comes in 11-13 in conference play. Texas A&M and Ole Miss get started at 6:30 tonight as well. The Aggies come in 15-8, tied for second in the SEC against Ole Miss, who is 12-12 after losing 2 out of 3 on the road. That final game in heartbreaking fashion last weekend against the Arkansas Razorbacks. The Auburn Tigers and Mississippi State will get back after it tonight, as will Vanderbilt and Missouri. It'll be game 2 of the series between Auburn and Mississippi State. So earlier this week, D1 Baseball came out with their newest regional projections, and as you would expect, a lot of SEC flavor. Georgia, the number 3 overall seed, would be hosting a super regional in Hattiesburg. D1 Baseball has that regional paired with the hold on, I got ahead of myself. Georgia hosting in Athens. That one is paired with the Hattiesburg Regional, where Southern Miss is the number 14 seed in this week's projections. The 2 seed, the Ole Miss Rebels, who for the last couple of weeks have been projected as a host, but after going 1-3 last week, they fell out of the hosting conversation, at least for now. Texas, the number 4 national seed, would host in Austin. You've got Florida, who's got a gaudy league record and a really good RPI and strength of schedule, but not a great overall record, projected as the number 12 seed hosting in Gainesville. How about this one? Auburn and Alabama paired with each other. Auburn is the number 6 national seed. Of course, that is going into the weekend in Starkville. Alabama currently projected as the 11 seed. Mississippi State back in the hosting spot. They project the Bulldogs as the number 10 seed with West Virginia, Michigan, and southeastern Louisiana in Starkville. And that one's paired up with Lawrence, Kansas, the red-hot Kansas Jayhawks, as a number 1 seed and a top 8 seed overall. And then finally from the SEC, Texas A&M in College Station projected as that final national seed. Now, remember, these are nothing but projections. These guys do it for a living. D1 Baseball, as good a reputation as there is out there covering the college game. But you got 2 weeks left in the regular season, and so a lot still to be decided. Pretty big news yesterday in the college basketball world. The NCAA officially announced that it will expand its men's and women's March Madness tournaments by 8 teams each. So going from 68 to 76 teams. This is a long-expected move that will drop more games into the first week of the highly popular tournament. The new 76-team bracket will jam 8 extra games for a total of 12, involving 24 teams into the front half of the first week of the men's and women's tournaments. It will turn what is known as the first 4 into a bigger showcase that will now be called March Madness Opening Round. The 12 winners will then move into the main 64-team bracket that will begin, as usual, on Thursday for men and Friday for the women. It's the first expansion the NCAA tournament has had in 15 years when they went from 64 to 68 teams. The NCAA says that it will distribute more than $131 million in new revenue to schools that make the tournament. That money will come via expanded TV advertising opportunities for alcohol companies. That has not previously been allowed. Said the value of the rights agreement will increase $50 million each year on average over the course of the 6 years of the deal. Most of the 8 new slots are expected to go to power conference teams that already were getting a bunch of the bids in the tournament. You may remember the SEC set a record 2 years ago when 14 conference teams made it into the bracket. Fresh off an SEC tournament championship a week ago, the Ole Miss men's golf team was awarded when the SEC handed out its postseason accolades. Ole Miss head golf coach Chris Malloy became just the second Ole Miss coach ever to be named SEC Coach of the Year. Along with Malloy being named the league's top coach, Rebel golfer Tom Fisher was named first-team All-SEC, and his teammate Cameron Tankersley was a second-team All-Conference player. That group played a pivotal role in Ole Miss winning their first SEC tournament championship in 41 years. Chris Malloy, again, just the second coach in program history, joining Ernest Ross, who did it twice in 1982 and 1984 to earn SEC Coach of the Year honors. Ole Miss is ranked 10th in the country. They are the number 2 seed in the NCAA Bermuda Run Regional. That's being hosted by Wake Forest in North Carolina. The Rebels have finished top 5 9 different times this year. They have won 3 tournaments. Postseason play begins, or I should say regional play begins on May 18th. And I thought this, an interesting story for you as we wrap up your morning sports update brought to you by Pearl River Resort. ESPN's reporters have put together for the teams that are in the way too early preseason top 25 a list of award candidates from each team. So the player on each of the top 25 teams that they think is most likely to win an award. Ohio State, the preseason number 1 team. Jeremiah Smith projected to win the Biletnikoff as the best receiver in the country. Just give you some SEC teams through here. Quarterback Gunnar Stockton, a Heisman Trophy would be the most likely award for a Georgia player. For Texas, it's Arch Manning with the Heisman Trophy. For Ole Miss, who is in the preseason top 10 at number 9, also Heisman Trophy for Trinidad Chambliss. Though they write one could easily go with tailback Kejuan Lacey after rushing for 1,567 yards and 24 touchdowns a year ago. But it is Trinidad Chambliss with a chance to win a Heisman Trophy. LSU had Whit Weeks as a linebacker, possibility for the Butkus Award. Oklahoma's Tate Sandell projected to be the Lou Groza Award winner, or at least the most likely winner of a national award off that Oklahoma team. That goes to the best kicker in the country. Alabama's, I don't even know how you pronounce that, Yanzi Pierre, linebacker that might be in the running for the Butkus Award. So just a little bit of a fun few college football nuggets for you as we're about 3 months away from kickoff. Your morning sports update brought to you by Pearl River Resort, online at pearlriverresort.com. That's pearlriverresort.com. Your Mississippi Lottery update is coming up next.
Good morning from the Venable Glass.
Keeping Mississippi in the know, one morning at a time. Mornings with Richard Cross on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Back with you. It is Mornings with Richard Cross, wrapping up the 6 o'clock hour. Thanks for joining us. Glad to have you along for the ride. It's time to get your update from the Mississippi Lottery online at mslottery.com. That's mslottery.com. Next jackpot drawing is coming your way on Saturday night for Powerball. $47 million. Just had a winner a few days ago, so the jackpot's starting to creep its way up a little bit. $21,100,000. The estimated jackpot the estimated cash value. So that's what you would walk away with, less taxes, and they cut into your profits a little bit, but certainly would make for a nice Saturday night, Sunday morning if you had all the right numbers on that. Get ready to spin big, Mississippi. The Mississippi Lottery is rolling out 3 all-new Wheel of Fortune scratch-off games this May. In fact, they are in your lottery local retailers right now. Tickets start at just $2. You can play your way up to top prizes of $200,000, plus multipliers and instant wins on every ticket, and the excitement doesn't stop there. Enter your non-winning tickets. There are a few of those out there into the Mississippi Lottery's second chance promotion for a shot at more than $250,000 in cash prizes, plus a chance to win a trip to Los Angeles to see a live taping of Wheel of Fortune. Play today, and you could be the next big winner. There's one more thing. Lotto America has gotten seriously big. It's the 3rd largest jackpot in the history of the game. It has rolled past $25 million. In fact, $25,070,000 right now. The estimated cash value of that is about $11.25 million, making it the 3rd largest in the game's history. Lotto America tickets are only $1 with the option to add the $1 All-Star bonus to multiply your non-jackpot winning prize, or Easy Match for another $1 for a chance to win instantly. Get your tickets at your nearest retailer for Saturday's drawing. What is coming up as we move on this morning? 7 o'clock hour. Told you earlier, we're going to replay some interviews from throughout the course of the week. We got some big picture headlines. Next week, and we'll talk about this in a few minutes in more detail, but next week has the potential to be a massive week for the political future of the state of Mississippi. Hopefully everything works out and nothing precludes him from being able to do this, but we are scheduled to visit with the governor, Tate Reeves, on Tuesday morning. Man alive, have we got a lot to talk with him about. I certainly look forward to that conversation. He has agreed to give us an extended amount of time. And so we will talk about with him the special session, his thoughts on that. We'll talk with him about this redistricting battle. I don't know if we'll get any news between now and then, but if Mississippi were to go down this redistricting road, then the clock is ticking. And I'm talking about congressional redistricting. But you've also got the court case that is happening with Judge Sherian Aycock and the briefs that were filed yesterday. And so we're kind of waiting to see what's going to happen there. Is there going to be a pause button that is pressed with regard to trying to redistrict for 2026? Is that Supreme Court districts only, congressional, all of that stuff? And we'll talk with the governor about that. And really looking forward to that. But the decisions that have got to be made about the future, whether the governor, as is his right, expands the call of the special session, changes the call of the special session, all of that is supposed to start in a week and a half. So this coming Wednesday will be a week away from that called special session by the governor. There's just a lot of unknown as we sit here on Friday morning. Bill Cork is going to join us. We talked with him yesterday. A lot of conversation about economic development, the places that they have been. Just got back from the Select USA Investment Summit. He told us that it was and is the largest foreign investment conference that happens in the United States each year. Mississippi was well represented. You'll hear about that and also what projects make sense for certain regions within the state of Mississippi. At 8:05 this morning, you will hear a conversation that I had with Dr. Leah Claire Bennett from Pine Grove Behavioral Health. May, as you probably know, or you may have heard us talk about earlier this week, is Mental Health Awareness Month. And we talk about a bunch of different aspects of the growth and the awareness of mental health related issues, the stigma that has traditionally been attached to those, and whether or not that is going away a bit. And then at 8:20, it's my visit with Secretary of State Michael Watson from earlier this week, trying to make sense of all of these court battles and what redistricting just might look like. First, though, we will take a time out. We've got your news coming up next, both local news and Fox National News. Then we'll jump into the 7 o'clock hour with you. Thanks for being with us. Mornings with Richard Cross, presented by Community Bank, rooted in our community, communitybank.net.
Was previously recorded.
Know where the news is going next. Mornings with Richard Cross on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome to the 7 o'clock hour of Mornings with Richard Cross on this Friday, May the 8th. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for making us part of your day, whether it's getting up and getting out the door for work, you're taking kids to school, or maybe you're just sitting on the back porch or the back patio this morning with a cup of coffee hanging out with us. We appreciate that very much. A little bit different on this Friday than maybe what you've become accustomed to. We got a mix for you today, a mix of some new content, things that you haven't heard yet, some stories that we haven't gotten to this week, but also some replays of some interviews that we have had throughout the course of the week. We're just trying some different things, and hopefully this is good for you. We're trying to make it good for us as well. Mornings with Richard Cross is presented by Community Bank. At Community Bank, we're more than just a place to manage your money. We're your neighbors, your partners, and your trusted financial advisors. For decades, we've been rooted in our community, helping families, small businesses, and individuals achieve their dreams, whether it's opening your first savings account, planning for a brighter future, or growing your business. We're here every step of the way. We're dedicated to our customers, committed to your success, and always here when you need us. Community Bank, rooted in our community, member FDIC. The 7 o'clock hour of the show today and every day is brought to you by our friends at MWG Employer Services. Running a business is tough, and if you're struggling with HR, benefits, and payroll, well, you're not alone. That's where MWG Employer Services comes in. They can provide a full range of employer services plus a custom plan that fits you. Give them a call today, 601-206-7966, or visit them online at mwgemployerservices.com. That's mwgemployerservices.com. Don't do a lot in the way of predictions, and this isn't some like breaking news prediction. But I do think that we are in for an interesting week and a half politically here in the state of Mississippi. And I think the timing is a little different than what we've become accustomed to, frankly. Right? We get the build-up in the fall to the start of a new legislative session. We get through New Year's Day, and then in that first week of the new year, a new session begins for the legislature. And if it's year one of a 4-year block after elections have happened, it's a 4-month session. If it's years 2, 3, and 4, it's a 3-month session. And then we know that sometimes there is a special session that is called. But usually between either the end of the regular session and the start of the next year, or the end of the regular session and the start of a special session, there's not a ton of news. There's a lot of work that's going on behind the scenes with hearings and meetings and committees that have been put together. And we'll talk about what Jason White has done coming up in just a second in terms of preparing for next year. But if there is a special session, it generally is a single issue session. And Governor Tate Reeves has pointed out on a number of occasions that in the time that he has been in the governor's mansion, he has never called a special session of the Mississippi legislature for a policy reason. He's done it for economic development projects. He's done it, just did it a year ago to pass the budget. But this year is a little unique. We were all waiting for the decision from the Supreme Court to be handed down in Louisiana versus Calais. And Louisiana got a favorable decision there. And it feels like it has absolutely just opened the floodgates in states really across the Southeast. Indiana was involved. But you're looking around, you know that Louisiana has put they've put a halt on their elections. Early voting was to have begun, and they had primaries that were on the way, and Governor Landry said, nope, stop, we're going to do the redistricting thing. It makes sense because Louisiana was at the center of the Louisiana versus Calais case, and of course the argument that they were making was that it is unconstitutional to base a voting district specifically and exclusively on race. That actually goes against, even though it was deemed to be unconstitutional, it goes against the way a lot of these districts have been gerrymandered. And I've said a bunch of times, gerrymandering, look, it's not a Republican issue, it's not a Democrat issue, it's a party that is in power issue. Parties that are in power use that power to draw favorable voting districts so that they can continue to be in power. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But this is different because it is about race, and it's about a repeal of at least part of the Voting Rights Act. Democrats, if we want to make it about Mississippi, Benny Thompson, chief among them, have been screaming from the rooftops and from the rafters. It's Jim Crow all over again. This is what we worked for to give people of color, black people in particular, the opportunity to win seats and to represent the people that live in their districts. But courts have mandated that districts be formed in a way that they are majority minority, which is to say, if you have a majority of black people in a specific district, even though they are a minority racially, they must be given the opportunity to be the majority within their voting district. And ultimately what the Supreme Court says is actually that's unconstitutional. You cannot base a voting district and the way the lines are drawn specifically on race. So fast forward to why this next week and a half is, I think, going to be so interesting in Mississippi. You've really got three different redistricting conversations that are going on all at the same time. We've talked about the ruling from Sherian Aycock, the judge that said Mississippi's Supreme Court districts must be redrawn to better represent the demographics, to create majority-minority districts. The state of Mississippi appealed that decision to the Fifth Circuit, and they received a stay on that decision pending the outcome of Louisiana versus Calais. So that's one issue that you've got going. And by the way, the Election Commission for Mississippi, which is made up of the governor and the Secretary of State and the Attorney General, are working on that case particularly, trying to go back. And I think, I've talked to enough people that I think the plan is they are trying to get Judge Aycock to withdraw her ruling, to allow the Fifth Circuit to rule, and then ultimately go back to the drawing board and redraw those districts. We'll see how that plays out, and it may take a little bit of time. It is possible that the thing that the state will give in all of that is, hey, we're not going to try and redraw lines before the elections that happen later this year, before midterms. So that's issue number one. Issue number two is the fact that in 2025, the courts made the legislative lines be redrawn in Mississippi. And the result of that was it created multiple majority-minority districts, and Republicans lost seats in both the House and the Senate. In the Senate, Republicans lost the supermajority. And so with the Supreme Court ruling in Louisiana versus Calais, is there a chance that the legislature or the state or the election commission goes back to that ruling and says, hey, the ruling that you made is unconstitutional, so says the Supreme Court, reverse it? And if that happens, then could you go back and reseat the legislators that lost their seats a year ago? And then obviously the issue that is getting the most national attention is congressional redistricting, and that's where District 2 comes into play, Benny Thompson in his longtime seat. All of these things are on the table, and I think we're going to get some answers in the very near future, in the next week, perhaps in the next week and a half, and we're just going to have to keep an eye on that and see how it all plays out. I mentioned a second ago, Speaker of the House Jason White announced earlier this week that he is putting together select committees to focus on specific issues. One of those issues is the current districting processes and legal considerations, ensuring Mississippi remains prepared to address future reapportionment with transparency, fairness, and adherence to constitutional requirements. A lot of words to say that they are going to look at redistricting. And the Speaker of the House has said this is going to be an issue that we will make a priority in 2027. Whew. A lot more coming up with you. Mornings with Richard Cross, Super Talk Mississippi. Coming up next, we will have a conversation that happened just yesterday. Mississippi Development Authority Executive Director Bill Cork joins me next. More coming up after this. Mornings with Richard Cross, presented by Community Bank.
Good morning from the...
No filibuster. Just everything you need to know to start your day smarter. Mornings with Richard Cross on Super Talk Mississippi.
Walks down the street, he says, why am I short of attention? Got a short little span of attention, and all my nights are so long. Where's my wife and family?
Back with you. It's Mornings with Richard Cross on Super Talk Mississippi, streaming at supertalk.fm, Supertalk TV, and of course on your Super Talk Mississippi radio stations. Thanks for joining us as we roll on. Obviously, there is a lot that is happening in Mississippi. You get to the end of the legislative session and you think, whew, we're done. And that's just not the case. Certainly not this year. You can be part of the conversation on the C Spire text line, 601-879-4395, 601-879-4395. Right now at C Spire, new and current customers can get a free phone, watch, and tablet plus 100 gigs of data for just $90. There's more to see. Visit cspire.com today. Here's my conversation from yesterday with the executive director of the Mississippi Development Authority, Bill Simmons. Right now, though, we get a chance to catch up with our first guest of the day, Bill Cork, world traveler, both domestic and abroad. He had a bunch of abroad meetings recently that were domestic, that were in Washington, D.C., at the Select USA Investment Summit. Bill, good morning.
Good morning, Richard. Good to see you again.
So how about that event? Looked like a lot of Asian country representation that was there, talking about jobs and projects and facilities, and I'm assuming receiving pitches from lots of states that want to be like Mississippi and keep attracting these projects.
Well, Select USA is the premier foreign direct investment conference in the United States. It started actually back during the Obama administration as a way to attract foreign investment into the United States. And what it looks like when you walk into this conference is it looks like the United States. Every state has a booth, and everybody's trying to pitch their wares, and over 5,000 registrations from across the world, companies from across the world come and get to shop the states for where they want to make investments in the U.S. And so the governors show up, all the secretaries of commerce like myself kind of show up. They have big delegations, and all the consultants that surround this industry show up, and it's just a giant bazaar, if you will, of possible foreign direct investment.
If you've ever been a first-time attendee or have a booth at a conference, sometimes you don't know what you're getting into the first time you go, and you feel like you wasted time and wasted money being there. How much planning happens in advance to set up meetings and have very specific events when something like this is going on versus just showing up and saying, hey, come see us?
No, it's all the work. All the benefit from conferences all happens way before they happen. So we have our team puts together dedicated meetings and schedules. There's also an app that the conference uses to allow companies we've never even heard of to reach out to us to schedule meetings. And we get those schedules put in place, and then we bring in our partners from the utility companies and the local communities and my team to help staff those meetings. The booth has like 6 meeting tables in our booth, and they were full nonstop for 2.5 days. We brought the governor in on Monday to meet with select key executives and to attend some really important receptions in the evening. And it's just a full court press to try to show the best of what Mississippi has to offer.
We know that over the last handful of years, while Governor Reeves has been in office, the focus has been on economic development, and there have been a lot of wins. We've talked about those. They're well documented, and they continue. I'm curious, this is probably a silly question that is an easy answer, but do companies and countries take notice of the states that are excelling and are stacking projects up one on top of the other?
Well, success begets success. That's what the governor likes to say, and we try to build that momentum early and change the reputation that we had about Mississippi, and that is paying dividends. Almost every major industrial development looking at a location in the Southeast Conference is looking at Mississippi. That just gets to the short list. I was thinking on the way in here as I was listening to you talk about a variety of issues, a conversation I had recently with about 5 years ago with a site selection consultant who was on a panel at one of these major site selection conferences, and he was bad-mouthing Mississippi on the panel about how he could never bring a prospect there because of our flag and because of, perception issues and our racial history and the whole thing. And that same consultant was in the state this week with a major multi-billion-dollar project. So the reality is,
were you able to gently remind him of his words from just a few years ago?
No,
or did you decide to kind of let bygones be bygones?
I've been accused of being a lot of things, and diplomatic isn't always one of them. But in this case, I thought restraint was the better measure here. But nevertheless, this reality is not only being perceived, I think, throughout Mississippi, but certainly throughout the industry, where the governor's now invited to talk about our success as a key feature. In fact, you can go to C-SPAN 2 and watch his speech at Select USA online. Fantastic representation of what the state's been able to do, and he did that in front of an audience of 5,000 people at that conference, this huge trade show area. And so, we're on the map, Richard, and it's a really exciting time to be doing economic development here.
There is probably no bigger name in business right now than that of Elon Musk. And when he says something specifically about your state, especially when it is packaged in a nice little soundbite, it kind of becomes or can become a rallying cry. Is that what has happened with speed to market being insane in Mississippi, the words of Elon Musk, at least paraphrased?
If you listen to any of the governor's speeches about economic development and our success, what he boils it down to one thing. We try to help companies go from spending money to making money the fastest. That's really the true incentive. That's the true message that every investor wants to know is, if I bring my capital here, how fast can I go from spending money to making money the fastest? And when you've got Elon Musk saying that the reason he picked Mississippi was because of our insane speed, I mean, that just I mean, we had on the back.
He's not a patient guy.
No, he's not. Well, his company, I've never seen anything like it. I think we talked about this the last time I was on your show, but we had our booth at the Select USA had a wall about 30 feet long by about 14 feet high, and we put that quote on the back wall. That's all it said. It's like, we've got speed in Mississippi, and that's all you have to tell these companies to get them interested in, well, what does that mean, and why does Elon Musk say that? And it just opens the conversation.
In my area of focus prior to kind of moving into the mornings and being locked in on news and politics, it was always sports. One of the questions that I always loved asking coaches was, hey, what's your recruiting pitch? When you're in a living room, when you're on a phone call with a player that you want or parents that you're trying to convince, and nobody ever really wanted to boil it down. We never got like the full sell from a coach on exactly the way they do it. Mm-hmm. I'm curious in terms of recruiting businesses, when you look at the competition, we know that South Carolina is a place that's on fire. Louisiana is being incredibly aggressive right now. So is Arkansas. Do you know what their pitches are compared to what you are pitching and how you're doing it?
We study this extensively. I've got a whole marketing and research department that focuses on comparative advantages in the other states and what they're doing on incentives and how they're positioning their logistics infrastructure and, you know, what their business climate is like. I mean, I'll give you an example right now. We're up against North Carolina in a lot of neck-and-neck competitions, but right now North Carolina can't get a budget passed out of their legislature. So believe me, I'm telling anybody who's looking at North Carolina, you really want to go in a place that's that unstable? You know, we help with that. But the truth is, we're not really competing against the states. When we make a sales pitch, our best effort is to understand what are the key drivers of that particular company, and they always focus on one of three things or all three things: speed to market, risk management, and their financial, and you know, their creditworthiness, their financial balance sheet. How are those three things going to perform in Mississippi? And we try to drill down into those ideas of speed, risk, and money, and then customize an offering that demonstrates we understand their need, that we have credible proof we can address what they want to do, and that we have a value proposition that can stand up to public scrutiny and testimonials from other companies. We focus almost exclusively on the relationship between us and the company. And then when we get down to those final, you know, competitions where we may be a semifinalist with another state, then we start to worry about the comparative advantages of other states. But in the first instance, our pitch is, what can we do for you to meet your needs?
I'm sure you saw the news from Louisiana this week. I think it was Governor Landry that talked about this potential 130,000-plus acre site where they're targeting aerospace development. Does that feel like direct competition? Is that something is that too big of a project? Is that too big of a land opportunity, or do we have the ability to go after something like that in Mississippi?
Well, look, I mean, there's a lot of economic development done by press release, right? Mm-hmm. When you're trying to change the perception of your state. And Louisiana's got a new governor and a new Secretary of Commerce over there, head of Louisiana Economic Development, and they've done a lot of planning, a lot of strategy, and a lot of messaging. And we're proud of that. We like the competition in the neighborhood. I think I've shared with you before. We've seen that ascendancy in Arkansas. It's a little less so in Alabama and Tennessee right now for a number of reasons. But I'm not so worried about what they're trying to do as much as I'm worried about what we're trying to do. And one thing I will tell you, Richard, is this last legislative session, our legislature and our governor fully funded the requests of MDA. We're one of the few agencies that got full funding. They reloaded all of our incentive programs. They've expanded our site development program. We put together an Energy Spark program. We are loaded for bear, and we are prepared to continue the march.
More with Bill Cork coming up right after this. Mornings with Richard Cross, SuperTalk Mississippi.
From the Seabrook
segment of Mornings with Richard Cross is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
Pour yourself a cup of coffee and get the Magnolia State's most important news of the day. Mornings with Richard Cross on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Try not to have to drop it.
Work as the executive director at the Mississippi Development Authority and is my guest this morning, and certainly always appreciate your time. I feel like it was probably a year, maybe a year and a half ago when you and I first visited, and the state during Tate Reeves' time as governor was at about maybe $40 billion or so in new investment. And you told me at the time, we're not slowing down, we're going to continue. That number has come close to doubling, or maybe more than doubled in the last 12 months. Is that right?
Yeah, it's over $80 billion now. And $60 billion of that is data centers. And so I want to be very clear, that when you rack them up $10 billion at a time, that number gets really big. Mm-hmm. But we've done over $20 billion in business expansions and smaller projects that often don't get the same attention that the data centers do. And just to compare that, I think in the previous 8 years to the Tate Reeves administration, there's about $7.5 billion in capital investment done. So it's almost 3 times just in the smaller projects. That doesn't even include the bigger projects. We've closed over 200, and I think we're over 220 deals now. And I've got about $180 billion in my pipeline at the moment, and another 45,000 jobs, over 150 projects looking at us right now. So it's just a never-ending pipeline of opportunities.
Is there any way to predict a close rate on a number like that, $180 billion additionally?
Our close rate kind of varies by sector. So where we have a strong natural resource advantage, we tend to get to a finish line a little quicker. For some that are just looky-loos that are looking at the whole Southeast Conference, we may be one of 14 states they're looking at, so the probability that we get a short list is a lot lower in those cases. We are seeing a lot of interest right now in the maritime and blue economy sector. In particular, we just hosted 30 Japanese shipbuilders here on the coast a couple of weeks ago that are seriously looking for their required investments that they're having to make underneath the President Trump's new trade deals. And so, for areas where we have a competitive advantage, like in the maritime economy or in forest products and things like that, we tend to do really, really well, very high closing rates. When it comes to traditional, say, consumer products, where they're looking for a very low cost, very logistics sensitive market, we are going to have a hard time competing with some of the major metro areas in the Southeast Conference. That's just kind of the way it is. But they look at us anyway.
You've said Southeast Conference several times. That's the footprint that you think about when you're talking about this region of the country, what we kind of think about in terms of football as well.
Yeah, it's exactly the same overlay, from Texas to the Carolinas and probably up to Kentucky. Increasingly, we're seeing Ohio and Indiana come into our picture as potential competitors as they sort of emerge in a much more competitive business climate. And they've got huge populations and big universities and things like that are really, really tough for us to compete with. So, we're increasingly seeing some of the more upper Midwest states. We still haven't seen places like Illinois or Michigan or New York or anything like that very often. Although that does happen, it's very rare. Usually the companies that are doing manufacturing in particular, Richard, are looking for certain logistics advantages. And so we happen to have those, and the Carolinas happen to have those. And it just depends on the type of company and what they're really trying to move around the world.
All right, so you talk about having success in specific sectors. What about when you have, and this is a somewhat local example to where I am, you have these regional development groups. We've talked so much about what has happened in the Golden Triangle over the course of the last decade and a half, 2 decades. But you have other groups that are trying to kind of break into that game as well, partnering with multiple counties to kind of put their best foot forward. I've heard where I am a focus on, hey, we can become a hub for defense intelligence or defense type companies that are a little bit different, maybe more technologically based than manufacturing based. How do you break into a relatively new sector so that Mississippi can have a success story like Redstone in Huntsville?
Well, clustering is always really important, and you'll notice, we have a lot of defense and blue economy tech and defense tech on the coast. I mean, that's a classic example. But in your neck of the woods in Oxford, what we're seeing is a lot of interest in pharmaceuticals, for example. You've got a great school of pharmacy, lots of chemists. a great research environment around biology and life sciences. Ryan Miller was at the Select USA conference, and of course he has the Oxford Lafayette area economic development group, right. And he's bringing those companies back. I think he's got a couple leads that have scheduled site visits just from the conference in those kind of verticals. And so I think you have to go with where your niche specialties are and kind of pitch those, and that's what each region of the state is trying to do. The Golden Triangle's they're on the plains. They had a lot of open land, a lot of easy developable spots. So you got the bigger, large footprint industrial companies that tended to locate there, and they had abundant power and some redundancy and good logistics infrastructure with the port there and rail. So that's a natural advantage for them. They also had the university up the road. But you've got, in Hattiesburg, for example, you've got a really interesting polymers cluster and forest products cluster because you're in the Pine Belt. And on the coast, you've got the maritime defense-related stuff with our military special forces and Navy oceanography. And so you see companies like Ocean Aero, which are doing ocean drones, are in that cluster. And so each region of the state has its own advantages. In the Delta, it's ag and ag tech, and we're seeing a lot of interest in that, as well as I'm seeing a new resurgence now in value-added manufacturing around things like cotton and textiles, using rice hulls for production of value-added products, because they know that the farmers up there are having trouble with the international market. So you see manufacturers trying to swoop in there and seeing if they can't get some low-cost feedstock to support their operations. So it just depends on where you are in the state and what regional competitive advantages you have.
Question on the C Spire text line, and this is maybe the most important question, although I do think there are layers to it, and it's, are Mississippians getting these jobs? You mentioned a second ago with that $180 billion in the pipeline and a potential 45,000 new jobs. Are those jobs that are going to Mississippians? I guess the layer that I would add to that question is, but it's not all bad if people come from out of state and move to Mississippi also, because now you're talking about increased tax base and growth within the state as well, and people coming as opposed to leaving.
Yeah, I mean, I heard a quote from for example, from Amazon Web Services that's got the big data centers in Madison County. Their workforce folks told us they're hiring about 80% of the people are in-state folks.
Really?
Yeah. Most of them.
That certainly is a percentage that you can live with, right?
Yeah, you could live with that, and think about the new talent that we're bringing in here and experiencing the state, and that are going to bring those great high-paying jobs and their skills, and then add value to our communities and our culture and quality of life. And you look at any of the other manufacturers, and you're going to see probably similar percentages. The existing family-owned kind of businesses around the state, like Taylor Machine Works and Holmac, and companies that were organically developed here in Mississippi, multi-generation Howard Industries, almost 100% of their employees and their expansions are local. So, we're benefiting Mississippi citizens, right? And where we don't have the skills and the numbers we need, we have to go outside the market to get those, and we welcome those folks. I mean, Richard, I'm not from Mississippi. I got a pretty good job, so it's, I think we're contributing,
There's kind of an old South adage that if you ain't from here, it's kind of hard to become from here. I've heard some executives in interviews, whether it's that you've talked about or Gerard has had conversations with, or that we've had conversations here, where people say, no, that's not what we find. We are finding that Mississippi is incredibly welcoming. Our people are ingratiating themselves when they come in. They're not trying to reinvent the wheel when they get here. What's your experience with that?
Well, Gad Saad just came to Mississippi, the University of Mississippi, and he's a popular pundit and kind of a political figure. And right. he had an ex-post the other day that talked about how welcome he felt. And I felt compelled to retweet that and talk about my wife and my own experience here when we came here 10 years ago. We just got loved on. People took us in. They made sure we had a church home. They made sure, like for me, when I first got here, I didn't have a place to live, and I got put up by in the monastery down at St. Augustine's in Bay St. Louis. They found a place for me to stay for a couple weeks until I found a place to live. And, it's just this. You
didn't have to take a vow of silence?
I didn't, but it was really cool, and I got to go pray with the priest, the retired priest there every morning for a few weeks, and it was amazing welcome. And I believe that the hospitality that Mississippi promotes is real, and it's addictive, and if you share those values and you love people back, it just it's amazing, and I just think it's real, and we experienced it ourselves.
The success story is also real, and it is not ending yet. Bill, I appreciate your time as always. Thanks for the update, and let's catch up soon.
Thank you, Richard. Have a great one.
Mornings with Richard Cross, SuperTalk Mississippi, streaming at supertalk.fm, and, of course, on your SuperTalk Mississippi radio stations. Thanks for being with us. More MRC after this.
Shaping Mississippi politics each morning. Mornings with Richard Cross. SuperTalk Mississippi.
Back with you as we wrap up the 7 o'clock hour of Mornings with Richard Cross. If you missed it yesterday, I hope you enjoyed it today. The conversation with Bill Cork. So much good stuff happening in the state of Mississippi. $85 million in economic development. I think Bill said, about $60 million of that in data centers. I know that's controversial to some. To others, it is not at all. And it's fascinating the way that the narrative has been shaped around data centers and their growth, not just in Mississippi, but in other parts of the country as well. We are glad to be with you and appreciate you joining the conversation. You can always listen to Mornings with Richard Cross on supertalk.fm, on Amazon Alexa, and, of course, on the SuperTalk Mississippi app. You can watch on SuperTalk TV, but the easiest way sometimes is old reliable, your local SuperTalk Mississippi station, a dozen of them across the state of Mississippi. There was history that was made yesterday at the Supreme Court. It had nothing to do with any decision that was passed down. It had to do with longevity. I guess it really depends on how old you are as to how well you remember this. There probably is a significant portion of our audience that doesn't remember anything about the hearings related to Clarence Thomas and the sexual harassment charges or accusations, not charges, accusations against him by Anita Hill. He vigorously defended himself in those hearings back in 1991. I would have been 11 at the time, but that's one of those things. Like there are a few news events from when I was a kid that just really, really stand out. In fact, I can name 4 or 5 of them just off the top of my head. It's man, this was the stuff that was dominating news coverage. I remember the explosion of the Challenger, the space shuttle. I didn't know what was really going on, but I remember Oliver North and the Iran-Contra hearings. I remember pretty vividly Baby Jessica and the well. I actually hadn't thought about that one in a long time. But, man, the news coverage of that and the rescue attempt and ultimately them getting her out safely, it was off the charts. And, as we got a little bit farther into the 90s, obviously the coverage of the Gulf War became so big. But this Clarence Thomas, the confirmation hearings and the sexual assault investigation and inquiry from the Senate was on every channel. And this wasn't at a time when you had all of the cable news channels that were just nonstop. Ultimately, Clarence Thomas was absolved of any wrongdoing and was confirmed as a Supreme Court justice. The first baby boomer on the Supreme Court hit a milestone yesterday. He is now the second longest serving justice in history. And he's at a point where it seems like his influence is greater than it has ever been. Clarence Thomas was once an outlier on the nation's highest court. He has become a towering figure in the conservative legal movement over the last decade as he has helped secure landmark rulings on abortion, voting, and Second Amendment rights. The only justice with a longer tenure in the Supreme Court than Justice Clarence Thomas was William O. Douglas. Thomas, if he stays on the court through 2028, would become the longest tenured Supreme Court justice in United States history, and there's no sign that he's planning to retire anytime soon. Ultimately, he was confirmed in 1991 after those contentious hearings that included sexual harassment allegations. Following the appointment of 3 conservative justices by Donald Trump in his first term as president, Thomas is now the most senior member of a supermajority that has overturned abortion as a constitutional right. That was Roe v. Wade. Ended affirmative action in college admissions, and let's remember he is a black man, and sharply limited, or at least placed some limitations on the Voting Rights Act. And it's fascinating, his sphere of influence off the bench may be as big because of the number of clerks that have worked under him and who are now serving in the Trump administration. It's really interesting to see. Thomas was just the second black member of the court, now has a tenure that tops 34 years, and it really has been an incredible tenure. I've said this over and over and over. The legacy of Donald Trump, history may define it based on the appointments that he made in his first term and potentially in his second term to the Supreme Court. But it was George H.W. Bush whose legacy is murky at best, that has Clarence Thomas as his appointee to the Supreme Court. 7 o'clock hour in the books. News coming up next. 8 o'clock hour on the way. Mornings with Richard Cross. SuperTalk Mississippi, presented by Community Bank.
Was previously recorded.
Mornings with Richard Cross here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
What else?
And always on the SuperTalk app.
Welcome again, Mornings with Richard Cross, SuperTalk Mississippi. Thanks for being with us on this Friday morning, weekend just around the corner. As always, the show is brought to you by Community Bank. At Community Bank, we're more than just a place to manage your money. We're your neighbors, your partners, and your trusted financial advisors. For decades, we've been rooted in our community, helping families, small businesses, and individuals achieve their dreams. Whether it's opening your first savings account, planning for a brighter future, or growing your business, we're here every step of the way, dedicated to our customers, committed to your success, and always here when you need us. Community Bank, rooted in our community, member FDIC. Here's another conversation from earlier this week on Mornings with Richard Cross. Linder. I am happy to welcome our next guest this morning, Dr. Leah Claire Bennett, who is the administrator at Pine Grove Behavioral Health and Addiction Services, one of the special places in the state of Mississippi. And Dr. Bennett, I appreciate you joining us. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and so it's top of mind, no pun intended, for a lot of people. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Good to be here.
What's the focus for all of you this month when we talk about mental health awareness? Obviously, that is something that is dealt with on a daily basis at Pine Grove across the spectrum of patients that you have and the issues that people are dealing with. But in terms of awareness and making other people that are maybe not within the boundaries of your facility, what should people be thinking about and talking about?
You know, we really want people to understand that mental health is it's how you're functioning on a day-to-day basis, and it's something that impacts us all. And, you know, we oftentimes will focus on our heart health or our cardio health, but we don't really focus on our mental health. And it's just as important, because not only does it affect our functioning, but it also affects our work, our relationships, and quality of life. So mental health, there's a ton of stigma. I think that's what keeps people from reaching out. And at Pine Grove, we won't know that help is available. You don't have to suffer in silence and not get the help you need.
You said there is a stigma. Is currently there still a stigma, or is that a past tense thing? Because I feel like we talk about this so much more than we used to, and people are so much more willing to open themselves up, and yet we still see people who go to those dark places and feel like they don't have an outlet.
It's really sad. I think that there has been progress made, but it does still exist. And we see it all the time where people just delay and delay. They will see anxiety and depression as a weakness as opposed to a medical condition that I just need to get some help for. I mean, the earlier people reach out and get help, the faster they can get better. But it's still, that stigma still exists and slows people down for sure.
Is there a correlation when you talk about, you know, the sooner you reach out being similar to, you said a heart condition a second ago. So like the early signs that, hey, I need to clean up the way I'm eating and I need to exercise more, before you're sitting in a doctor's office and he's saying you have to have surgery tomorrow. If you'd taken care of things a little bit earlier, you don't get to the point, hopefully, where you're in such a bad spot.
Absolutely, because, you know, one of the things that you're working on early on is coping skills, right? You're learning how, and therapy can teach you how to cope and teach you some strategies early on. You know, if you get further into it to where it's more of a crisis, there's a lot more to have to deal with and unpack. And so early mental health care can really teach you how to navigate the highs and lows of life. And getting that help really helps you buffer, just like eating a healthy diet helps you buffer lots of negative health outcomes in the future. So absolutely correlation.
I don't know exactly what the population breakdown is at Pine Grove between adults and children and teenagers, and I know you deal with ages kind of across the board. It is, I'll just say young people, I guess, and maybe that's kind of a catch-all category. Is that the demographic where mental health issues are growing the fastest?
I would say that they definitely are growing. In children, we're seeing much more, a lot of difficulties around anxiety, depression, irritability, emotional dysregulation, more so than we've ever had before. That's being driven by things like social media. There's a lot of pressure now around grades. There's always been that, but it seems to be increasing with all the expectations and family stress, just stress of the day-to-day. So children, I think, are experiencing a lot more than what you and I did growing up. And so we are seeing the impact of that and the growth of that in that population.
I feel like sometimes it's easy to make social media the boogeyman. And it's like the catch-all category for so much of our issues start with social media, whether it's X or Instagram or Snapchat or Facebook or whatever it is. Take me a little deeper, though, beyond just social media. When you talk about the pressures that young people are dealing with and what that looks like beyond just online.
I mean, I think that when you think about social media, one of the things that's so critical with that is looking at the comparison that they're always making of themselves to others, and not being able to live up or being able to be as good as, so that there's this constant message of comparison that occurs that can be very detrimental. There's also bullying online that happens. There are things that people, you know, when you and I were growing up, it had to be said in person. There's a lot more that happens to where no one knows where it's coming from, and it's very public. And so that can be devastating for children and adolescents and what they're experiencing. And so you look at the complexities of what social media brings to a child's life or an adolescent's life, and that navigating those waters is extremely difficult. It's difficult for me as an adult to navigate all of that. So you think about someone whose brain is not fully developed and they're trying to figure all that stuff out, and it's extremely impactful to them. And I think what's driving a lot of what our problems are.
we're kind of right in the middle of it right now. I've got a daughter that's 16 today, a son that's 13, and a daughter that's 8 that's about to be 9. I don't know if you have children or not, but I wonder if we're just too busy. And like this like constant motion that we're in, where it's ball games and it's school and it's extracurricular activities, and I guess I'm aging myself a little bit here, but it's like the ability to just go be a kid and to go play with others in the neighborhood and be outside. I'm wondering if we have robbed, either intentionally or unintentionally, some of our kids of a more innocent childhood than maybe we had growing up.
Oh, absolutely. We overschedule kids beyond imagine. So it's really unreal what kids and their schedules can look like. I actually was having this conversation with my daughter last night, and she was talking about all the things that kind of, in a sense, get overwhelming, and trying to navigate that. And so having downtime and learning how to be bored, I mean, that's a skill in life, and that's one that they're not learning. Learning how to be alone, learning how to deal with downtime. And that's really when we regulate our emotions. And so they're not learning those skills that they definitely need in their life.
It's that's sometimes hard to say out loud, because I think as parents, we don't use what I say is the most difficult word in the English language to use, and that's no, often enough. I don't like saying no to my kids. I don't like saying no when my wife and I are having conversations. That's a weakness for me.
Right.
Is that the biggest issue? Is like we've got to learn how to say no and reclaim some of our time?
I think that is a critical point, and that the ability to, I see it as setting boundaries. Like you're setting kind of safety nets around the kids when you do say no. So it's not necessarily that you are taking something from them, but you have to look at it as I'm giving something to them, right? So to say no to one thing is saying yes to another. And so what I'm saying yes to is more family time or more downtime for you. And really helping them learn to cherish that as well. So not just having it, but talking about it with them. I think that they need to be able to understand the importance of that, and that happens through those conversations with them.
What about the role that parents play in trying to be a friend versus trying to be a parent?
I think that can be a very difficult line to walk. And you just said you have a 16-year-old today. Happy birthday. And
thank you.
It's some difficult times. Yeah. And so you want to be a person that they come and talk to, right? You want to have that open communication. You want to create an atmosphere to where you are not constantly on them and jumping down their throat. And so that's important to create that atmosphere, but you can't be a person that's just going to say yes to everything. You have to be able to, parenting is not about making them happy. It's about helping guide them to make healthy decisions for themselves. And that comes from modeling from us. And so if we are not able to say no and use those words, we teach them also to not use those words. And so that becomes a huge detriment to them moving forward.
Dr. Leah Claire Bennett with Pine Grove Behavioral Health and Addiction Services. I appreciate your time this morning. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. It's good, I think, that we're talking about this, and hopefully we can continue that with you in the near future. I appreciate your time today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Richard. You have a great day.
You as well. Mornings with Richard Cross, presented by Community Bank. We're back after this.
From the Venable Glass.
Start your day right. Mornings with Richard Cross on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome again. It is Mornings with Richard Cross on SuperTalk Mississippi. Glad to be with you on this Friday morning, the 8th of May. Mornings is presented by Community Bank. At Community Bank, we're here for every part of your financial journey. Looking to manage your personal finances? Our banking services make it simple, secure, and tailored to you. Ready to grow your business? We offer expert guidance and custom solutions to help your business thrive. If you're dreaming of a new home, our mortgage specialists are here to make the process seamless, all designed with you in mind. We're more than just a bank. We're your partner for life's biggest moments. Community Bank, rooted in our community. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. You can always join the conversation on the C Spire text line, 601-879-4395. That's the number again, 601-879-4395. Visit them online at cspire.com. C Spire, customer inspired. On Wednesday, Secretary of State Michael Watson joined Mornings with Richard Cross, and we covered a lot of ground with regard to potential redistricting, some of the active court decisions that are hanging in the balance, some big picture thoughts on how Republicans and Democrats differ in their views over redistricting. And we started the conversation by talking about how crazy the past couple of weeks have been post Louisiana versus Calais from the Supreme Court.
Yeah, man, it has been a busy couple of weeks, couple of months. So, first of all, you well know the Calais case came down from the Supreme Court, and that's triggered a lot of this conversation about redistricting. We also had the case dealing with our Supreme Court districts, which Judge Aycock up in Northeast Mississippi ruled on, and we've been in some conversations of late, some couple of motions perhaps being filed, maybe even today. So I can't really talk much about that. But that also is on the top of our minds. Again, the redistricting piece they're dealing with Calais, doubled up with the Supreme Court questions that are in Mississippi now. As you well know, we have elections that are scheduled for this year. One of them one of the districts had no one qualify because there was not a district for him to qualify in. So again, those things have been on our minds here throughout the entire legislative session. But
let me make sure I understand that clearly. There is a sitting Supreme Court justice who did not qualify for re-election because he does not have a district, because of the limbo that we are in with redistricting as it pertains to Supreme Court districts?
Yes, but that was not Calais. That was the other, I think it's the White case, White v. SBC. So that case basically said there was a Section 2 issue, and you're going to have to redraw those lines, even though we have a African-American sitting Public Service Commissioner and an African-American sitting in the Transportation Commission. I thought she made a terrible decision. Let me stop there before my lawyers get nervous. But
I understand.
Yeah. So that's again foresight. I mean, going into this situation and then Calais coming down made that much more interesting. So we've got a couple of cases that we're dealing with the Supreme Court redistricting as well as Calais now, and it's kind of thrown that mix to us of, well, gosh, how do you proceed? And that's where we are. So we could talk different directions, but I'm very cautious of making sure we don't get too deep in the legal part.
No, I understand that. And you and I have talked before about the challenge that exists for you and others now. As you have made it clear that you are running for lieutenant governor, and you had that announcement a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about how do you manage doing the job that you currently have, which is serving as Secretary of State for the state of Mississippi, while also looking to the future and hoping for that opportunity down the line. Your current role is kind of the chief overseer of elections in the state of Mississippi. We've talked so much about election integrity and ballot box integrity. When you hear about, there's so many people that are asking about congressional redistricting, mm-hmm. and primaries have already happened. What might that look like if Mississippi was to go down that road? And I ask that because there are surrounding states that are going down the road. Georgia has said they can't do it. Louisiana has pressed pause. Tennessee seems to be moving forward. Alabama seems to be moving forward. What might that look like in Mississippi, considering that we've already started the process?
Yeah, I mean, you make a great point there because we are in the middle of an election. We've already had our primaries that puts Mississippi in a difficult position. It's not as easy as folks would say, well, let's just flip the switch. It's easy to say that from the cheap seats when you don't have to do the hard work. The key there is to dig in. Okay, what does this look like? So for us, and I'm going to back up. Let's go 30,000 foot really quickly and what this would look like timeline, Richard, for us to be able to get everything done. And remember now, you redistrict. That puts the pressure on our circuit clerks, et cetera, at the county level to get these lines put in place in time into SIMS. We've seen issues in the past where you got some folks that the lines, these are not granular. So you got people out literally driving down the road saying, hey, let's make sure this GPS point here or this address there is on the correct side of the street and make sure that's the part that's in the map. Because if it's not, then that person is disenfranchised. They can't vote. They're voting in the wrong district. So there's so much that goes into the redistricting piece, then putting it into the maps, into the state election management system. That's really hard, and you can't be crunched on that. So if the perfect world, if everything miraculously worked out time-wise, we would have qualifying end on August the 20th. The ballots would be pushed by September 9th. Then UACAVA starts September 21st, and the general special on November 3rd. So that would give our counties until September 9th to get the redistricting done into the maps, et cetera. That's a perfect, and I just want to give you that oversight for a perfect, what it looks like to make sure everybody's got at least maximum amount of time to get everything done.
So that is hypothetically if the legislature were to say we are going to redraw congressional districts, but would that mean you would have to invalidate the primaries that have already happened?
And that's the other piece. So if we did that, if the state goes down that line, you're going to have lawsuits. Let's be very clear. Somebody's going to file a lawsuit in that. And look, it goes also down to the congressional members. I think that's the part where can we get everybody on the same page and make sure we're doing this correctly and with plenty of time to make sure that we don't get in a crunch and mess up with our lines into the system, et cetera. So those dates I was telling you is basically these are kind of drop deads. We've got to have everything done by these timelines. So back that up. You got a special session that's called. You also have the complications of being in the middle of an election now. So would the congressman from the 2nd District challenge that? Absolutely. What does that look like in court? Then you say, well, if we're going to have, are we going to have primaries? If we're going to have primaries, again, that time crunch, they're not going to have much time to get those maps done. And then you look at, all our statutes kind of tend to deal with vacancies. Is that a vacancy? The district was not vacated. Again, there's just so many complications in here, Richard, to kind of walk through to make sure that does the statute address that. If it doesn't, you're going to have to add that to the call. We're talking about the Supreme Court.
The call being the special session that the governor has scheduled for May 20th.
Right. And so I'll bring in just another one. Again, we can talk about all kinds of different things here. But Supreme Court, technically, if and this is not in the call now, so it'd have to be added, technically, the reason why nobody was able to qualify is because they didn't know the district. So depending on this White case, if the district stays the same, then really all you missed was the qualifying deadline. So do you just simply move the qualifying deadline back and run it as a regular, typical, election there? So you would have to add that to the special call because that statute specifically is not in there. So again, I'm just saying there's so many different pieces here of the onion to peel back when you look at a great example, vacancy. Well, there isn't a vacancy because it wasn't vacated. So again, lots to talk about, but it's not just as easy as people think. Hey, let's flip the switch, let's draw lines, and throw the election. It's a lot of work that goes into it.
We'll continue the conversation with the Secretary of State in just a couple of minutes. I will ask you this as we go to the break. I thought it was a really the phrase that you used to say it's easy to sit in the cheap seats and say, "Oh, just do it." And I had this vision of the President of the United States sitting in the upper deck in the corner with the cheapest seat in the building, because I think he's going to be one of the ones that's like, just do it. Just go do it, because that's the encouragement that we've seen from him. And yet I think of him as more of a skybox guy on the 50-yard line.
He was not who I was referring to in the cheap seats.
I know that. I am well aware of that. But I had this vision of he's sitting up there with Secret Service guys and snipers all around him.
He's got a very expensive seat.
Yeah. But it feels like there will be pressure from the White House to try to do this, doesn't it?
100%. And that's you've already seen that in the media, social media especially. It's coming.
We're back right after this with the Secretary of State, Michael Watson. Mornings with Richard Cross, Super Talk.
From the Sebro.com.
From Sumner to Summit to Summerall, Richard has something for you. Mornings with Richard Cross on Super Talk Mississippi.
Welcome back. Mornings with Richard Cross, Super Talk Mississippi. Here is the rest of my conversation with the Secretary of State and the candidate for Lieutenant Governor in Mississippi, Michael Watson. We know that the governor has called a special session for the purpose of redrawing Supreme Court district lines in Mississippi. But there is pending litigation in the lawsuit at the Chancery Court level, but also a stay at the Circuit Court level. Is that? I may have my courts confused on what is where.
Yeah, so we're at District Court, and then you also Court of Appeals issues. So, by the way, 888-808-8637 Super Talk call-in line. Don't forget that one. But yeah,
we don't use that actually. I appreciate your help with the notes in front of you, but it's the C Spire text line at 601-879-4395.
I was set up.
That was the super secret. Well, now if you want to take calls, we might see if we could reopen that.
Okay.
I know you enjoy visiting with the people of the great state of Mississippi.
Hey, look, we just came off a 3-day, 11-city stop announcing Lieutenant Governor. Richard, that was one of the most fun pieces of it, just talking to everyday Mississippians about the campaign and what's important to them. So really, really enjoyed that. And talking to the people is really where you get your answers. They're smarter than folks give them credit for.
I do want to ask you about that coming up in just a minute. But in terms of where we are right now, theoretically, 2 weeks from today, a special session begins. Is there going to be a need for the special session?
I have reason to believe there will be. Yes. Now, what is in that special session, I think, is the question. For example, as I mentioned to you before, if we can treat the Supreme Court issue, if lines are not forced to be redrawn this year as just a typical election, then all you have to do is move back the qualifying deadline. So that would have to be added to the session. If the governor decides, you know what, the president's correct, we need to bring in our congressional lines, you got to obviously expand the session, what all is entailed there. And again, that's his decision with the special session, and we'll see what happens here in the next few days. Yeah, let's talk high, much higher level. This whole issue, why folks are upset or not upset about redistricting and the congressional piece. You've seen some of the graphics of late, the New England portion of our country, and it is just rock solid blue. Rarely do you see a red map or a red district. And if you look at the breakdowns, we'll take Massachusetts, for instance, you got 40+ more percent Republicans that turn out to vote, yet they are not properly represented in Congress. And I think that's one of the things that the president has looked at. Is it good for our country to have these swings? No, I do not think it is. But if you sit by and watch how the left has done this for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, at some point in time, if you do not, meet their mettle, for lack of a better term, then they're just going to keep running over you. And I think that's where the president comes in and says, well, and I'm going to take one step back. You've got these, for instance, there's a certain Secretary of State in the state of Michigan that loves to talk about team democracy. Well, if you really want to talk about team democracy, why aren't you out there telling these New England states, hey, you're not doing it right here. This is not team democracy. You're just far left. We should also give the Republican voters out there the ability to be represented in Congress. I don't hear that coming from team democracy. And I think that's where the line gets drawn. They want it one way, period. They want to talk about this great, glorious team democracy, but at the end of the day, they don't want the Republican folks to have a voice. And so I think that's where the president has come in, and I think you got to tip your cap to him. If they're going to keep playing that way, then if you don't, then eventually you get run over. And I think that's the problem long term. You see Republicans working hard with conservative issues. We're the party of law, and we don't like to play like the left plays, but this is one of those issues that, again, I don't think it's good for the country long term, but part of me says you just don't have a choice. So you're going to have to do something to counteract the way that they operate.
You got me now?
Oh,
does that work? There we go.
He's in.
Well, we had to do a little bit of scrambling, but may have some weather issues across the state of Mississippi today. Michael Watson, the Secretary of State, is our guest as we wrap things up on Mornings with Richard Cross with him. I'm curious, you mentioned that tour across the state of Mississippi across 3 days. My guess is you needed a nap when that was all said and done, because it was a lot in a short amount of time. But when you do something like that, when you bounce across the state and you talk to group after group after group and you get to interact with Mississippians, obviously Mississippians who are for you, at least for the most part, some who are trying to learn, what do you take away from that in terms of meaningful conversations versus just kind of high level, shake hands, smile and take a picture and move on to the next person?
Yeah, I think the key is there, Richard, you have to listen. And that's the great part about, being an elected official who understands those are the people that hired me to do this job. Those are the folks that will fire me if I don't do my job. And at the end of the day, they're my bosses. And so what really matters around your kitchen table is what I want to get to the work of. Should we move on to the Lieutenant Governor's office? We've got an event coming up this fall. We're going to call it our kitchen table tour. And I've had people ask, where's your platform? What are all the things that you're doing? And we've got that kind of mapped out. But the key is before we wanted to really roll it out, I want to sit down with common just Mississippians who understand, hey, here are the things that really changed my life or could change my life. Here are the things that really impact, my family and my community. Those are the things that we need to address. I don't want this, easy, get people excited and, those are great. The red meat issues, et cetera, whatever. I want to do some of the hard things that actually make people's lives better. So, sitting down, traveling the state, listening to them, that's how you get those ideas. And, when people say, hey, this is the specific issue in my community that I see time and time again, why have we not addressed this? Let's address it. And I think it's important that we do hard things. So that's going to be really important to kind of finish out our platform and the ideas of things that we're going to try to work on to accomplish at that office.
You've talked to us a lot about kind of the association of secretaries of state. Do you exchange text messages on like election eve or the day after with other state secretaries of state? I mean, Indiana and Ohio had big election days yesterday. Do you hear from those people or communicate with them around a big election day?
100%. Yeah. And it's a lot of fun. And for us, getting towards November when we're all on the clock, we all talk about, hey, look, what are you seeing? What's going in Indiana? What's happening down in New Mexico and Florida, et cetera. So if there are cybersecurity issues or if there are, what other issues you could see on election day that may be happening across the country, it's fun to have them to lean on, to listen to, and to learn from. And I think that's the beautiful part about the 50 Laboratories of Freedom. Different states do it in different ways. Learning from them and also of late, it's been fun for Mississippi to really be able to teach them the things that we're doing. We have skyrocketed up the ladder when it comes to election integrity, and a lot of folks ask questions. As a matter of fact, I was literally just at an elections conference last weekend talking about the good things happening in Mississippi, and folks are funny that they're paying attention to Mississippi and wanting to learn, well, how did y'all do this? And then it's great. Mississippi literally is at the tip of the spear when it comes to election integrity right now. So being able to go to those events and talk to other secretaries and tell them the great things that are happening in our state has made me really proud of the work that we've done at the Secretary of State's office.
And last thing, it was funny, you were talking about the redistricting battle, and if Mississippi were to go down that road, you suggested that there would be a lawsuit immediately. And I mean, that's not going out on some limb from Representative Thompson. I think we got the example of that and the proof yesterday in Florida. I mean, we're 3 days from the Florida legislature saying these are the new district lines, and the lawsuits literally started yesterday in that state.
That's the left's model. They're going to challenge every single thing they could possibly do in court to draw it out, to make it hard to get it done. So that's coming.
I appreciate your time and wish you all the best. I'm sure we're going to have questions going forward about some of the process as all of this unfolds, sure. And look forward to visiting with you then.
We'll do it.
And no doubt we're going to continue to try to get answers to those questions in the weeks ahead. I talked about it earlier. Next week is a really big week for the state of Mississippi. We're going to be watching Judge Sherian Aycock to see what comes out of her court, if there's perhaps some sort of a stay on her ruling of the Supreme Court district redistricting that she has previously said has to happen. As the governor calls that special session, is there going to be an expansion of the topics? Is congressional redistricting something that's going to be addressed here in Mississippi? And we will have to just wait and see, but I think we're going to start getting some of those answers sooner rather than later. The biggest event of the year on the coast is happening this weekend. It's CPR Fest coming up Saturday at the Mississippi Coast Coliseum. A day full with a ton of great hard rock bands and some softer rock mixed in as well. Headliner is Stained. Tickets are going fast. You can get yours by going to the Coast Coliseum box office or to Ticketmaster. Thanks again to Secretary of State Michael Watson for joining us earlier this week. Hope you enjoyed that visit with him. We'll take a time out. We'll wrap things up. Mornings with Richard Cross, Super Talk Mississippi, presented by Community Bank.
From the Venable Glass Traffic Center.
Morning, partner. The sun is up, the coffee is on, and you're starting your day right. Mornings with Richard Cross, here on Super Talk Mississippi.
All right, here we go. One last time, racing with you toward the weekend. Maybe your day is just beginning and you've got a few more hours before you can check that box and head to the weekend, or maybe you're fortunate and you're not working on a Friday and you get to start the weekend early. Whatever it is, we appreciate you making Mornings with Richard Cross part of your daily routine and for being with us on this Friday morning. Maybe you are coming to Oxford this weekend. You've got Ole Miss baseball going on. You've got Ole Miss graduation. I'm just thinking out loud here. Kind of a crazy idea, but have you messed around and thought, man, I really want to do something special for my graduate this year, but I hadn't quite been able to figure out what it is? Well, maybe it's a new car. Maybe you want to send them off after college and a graduation into the new world with a brand new vehicle. May I suggest you stop by on Highway 6 West coming into town. If you're coming from Batesville, it's on your right. Belk, Ford, and Oxford Toyota. Great people. First of all, you're just going to deal with fantastic people. Secondly, you are going to deal with a place that's got a really good selection of new and previously owned vehicles on the lot. And third, if you're looking for a time to buy, there is no time that is better than right now with the reintroduction of employee pricing. That means you pay what the employees of Ford Motor Company pay or the dealerships pay. You're going to be paying below the number that you see on the sticker on the window of a car on the lot. So whether it's a brand new Ford F-150 or it's an F-250 Super Duty or it's an Explorer or an Expedition or a Mustang, whatever it is, the price that you see on the sticker, that's not what you're going to pay because you're going to pay the employee pricing number. In some cases, that could be more than $10,000 off the sticker price on a brand new vehicle. They'll tell you all about it at Belk Ford and Oxford Toyota. Great people, not pushy. And here's the other thing. I've been a Belk Ford customer for a long time. I've told you that before, going back to the late 90s. I guess it was 1999, spring of 1999, when I got my first vehicle from Belk Ford. I've been a customer ever since, and there's a reason I keep going back. I was going back long before we had this partnership where I talked about them some on the radio. I was going back because I liked their product and I liked their people. They were easy to deal with. They were honest. And you felt like you were getting a fair deal. I'm not saying you were getting a free vehicle or you got some 50% off or something. You were just getting a fair deal because that's how they dealt with you. They wanted not just for you to be a customer today, but you to be a customer for the next 20 or 30 years. Stop by and see them. Tell them you heard about them on Mornings with Richard Cross, that I told you about them. I promise you they will take care of you at Belk Ford and Oxford Toyota. I have intentionally avoided this all week long. I feel bad leaving you with this going into the weekend, but I feel like it's worth mentioning. The hantavirus, are you following this story? This is something that felt like it was a world away, a cruise ship that was carrying 150 people, including 17 Americans, sailing from Argentina toward Antarctica and then across the Atlantic Ocean, is currently docked off the coast of Cape Verde, an island off of Africa's west coast, after a handful of passengers that have since been evacuated from the ship were diagnosed with hantavirus. Hanta? Now, I don't think this is a wet market in China. I don't think this is developed in a lab in China. In fact, it's actually pretty disgusting. It is excrement from rodents, which makes you wonder what's running around in those ships, that can become airborne and get into your lungs and takes a while to show up and develop. But the 17 Americans that were on board that ship is cause for concern because we saw the butterfly effect, the way a virus spread in 2020 when we dealt with coronavirus and its subsequent variants. And so this is cause for concern because there's no known treatment or cure for this. And you've got 4 patients in the United States who are back in the United States and were on that boat that are being monitored. A Georgia Department of Health official said in a statement that it's monitoring 2 residents who are currently in good health and show no signs of infection. A California Department of Public Health spokesman told The Hill that it is assisting local health authorities with monitoring an unspecified number of residents who were on the ship. And an Arizona Department of Health Services spokeswoman told The Times it is monitoring 1 resident who is not symptomatic. And then you got Virginia, who told Newsweek that they are monitoring 1 traveler that is currently in good health and not showing any signs of infection. The hope is that nobody that was on that ship has brought it back to the United States. The concern is we've seen what a virus can do, and this is downright concerning. Hantavirus, variants found in different countries, usually spread by contact with urine, saliva, or droppings from rodents, especially when it becomes airborne. Gross. Thanks for being with us. That does it for this week. We hope you have a great weekend. Mornings of Richard Cross on SuperTalk Mississippi.
A SuperTalk Mississippi Media production.